of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Both of us single dads from the Midwest, we can talk about it. Or we can get gully, I'll size up your body and put some white chalk around it.
Welcome to the Single Dads of the Midwest, episode 40, joined by two amazing guests today. One is, of course, the one and only Don Sheldon, the one who keeps this podcast alive. But of course, we need the actual content. So we are also joined by Cory to talk about Fallout 4, game design, and all things fun. This will be a more stream of consciousness podcast. But for those who enjoy the Fallout series or video games in general, I think this is the podcast for you. If I missed anything, Don or Cory, please feel free to introduce yourselves in any way you see fit.
Now that sounds good. Stream of consciousness might be the right way to introduce this, because your dear listeners, you deserve to understand what is about to happen. Let me be clear: I am not an expert on Fallout or the Fallout community. I am not an expert on game design. I just like talking about it. It was over 7 years ago that I last played Fallout 4, and I have done no research in preparation for this. This is not an analysis. This is not a review. This is a journey through the stain that Fallout 4 left on my conscience.
So we're starting off with hot takes right off the bat. Go for it, Don.
Oh, the hottest.
So with that introduction, Cory, would you like to describe what is Fallout? What is this franchise? What is this video game series?
For the totally uninitiated, Fallout is a series of role-playing games. Again, not an expert, but initially I'm going to get the name wrong, Black Isle Studio, right? Eventually bought by Bethesda. Bethesda did some strange things to it, handed it back to Black Isle for one weird Fallout New Vegas game. Then Bethesda got it back. But generally, you're some kind of survivor in the American post-apocalypse. It's got this really fun, quirky kind of deco style. No, that's the wrong word. But basically, technology continued to advance, but everything continued to be kind of 50s, 60s style. So you got the funky hair and the funky furniture and all that business. But as I mentioned, I am no expert on the Fallout universe. So what I am here to talk about is, in particular, is the factions of Fallout 4 and why they are all insultingly stupid.
Can I add to that? I feel like the way to describe the Fallout series is an alternate universe that kind of diverges around 1950, that reimagines the future after a nuclear war in the way that people in the 40s and 50s might have thought of it. So they have robots, but no touchscreens. They have nuclear-powered battery packs, but no social media. They have laser guns, but they don't really have the modern technology, information technology in the way that we have it. And so in this game series that started in the 80s or the 90s, the game series has evolved in a weird way to some people's, happiness and some people's perhaps frustration.
Before we get into the factions, that kind of said, I haven't played Fallout 4, but it sounds similar to the idea of BioShock and to some extent Borderlands of this, well, especially BioShock, this idea of 50s, 60s Americana, futuristic weapons, but sort of also retro at the same time. Granted, there's also magic and other weird stuff involved, but it seemed like a similar vibe to that, just based off that description.
A little bit, yeah. And so Fallout 4 was not the fourth game in the series. There were all these spin-offs and other things. The first two are top-down, isometric sort of turn-based combat, where 3 became a real first-person shooter. And I got my own opinions on that. But let's skip past 3 and New Vegas, and let's talk about Fallout 4.
So you can see here that Don did research in preparation for this conversation, and that is not the vibe I intended to bring.
No, I didn't do any research. I'm going off of my memory.
Oh.
It's okay. This is not. We are not claiming to be experts. We made that very clear off the jump.
No,
but I'm excited to hear this rant. So should we go straight into the factions?
Oh, yeah.
In order to understand the factions of Fallout 4, you have to understand what the story is.
Fair.
Cory, do you want to explain the story of Fallout 4?
Yeah, I'll try and put as much effort into it as the writers did. So basically, it's the You're a happy man or woman. You get a pick. You get to design some monstrosity or just go with the defaults. And you got a kid, you got your spouse, everything's hunky dory, and then oh no, the bombs come. Fortunately, you got a spot in this nifty vault to go survive. But then oh no, you get cryogenically frozen, and your spouse and your kid. Uh, but then what happens? You wake up for reasons, kind of dumb reasons, to just long enough to witness some dude prying open your spouse's pod, shooting your spouse in the head, and stealing your baby boy and running off. And then you get frozen again, and then unfrozen later. And now you gotta and now you are on a mission to go track down your son, save him, get him back, and then you immediately abandon that and then go build a settlement or explore ruin or whatever.
That's basically it.
And then yeah.
Wow, that's a wild.
Yeah, there's a very palpable disconnect between what your character should probably logically be doing in this situation and what the player is almost certainly doing. Because like I mentioned, your son just got kidnapped, your spouse just got killed. You're probably not going to focus on the main story for a while. That can be resolved later. Who cares? Although every time your character has a conversation with someone, they'll be very much, I must go rescue Sean. This is the most important thing. Ignore the fact that I just spent the last 20 hours building a giant dick out of my settlement.
So one of the most exciting features about Fallout 4 was that the players can build their own like settlements in this post-apocalyptic wasteland. But turns out building these settlements is actually expectation differed from reality. And maybe that's a good segue into the Minutemen.
Oh boy. Okay, so there are four main factions in Fallout 4 that you can join up with. And you will end up having to pick one of them as you go through the main story. And the first you will probably encounter is the Minutemen, who used to be a big old militia, helping settlements survive, helping out people. They've been whittled down to basically like 6 people by the time you meet them, all hold up in a building being beset by raiders. And you come in, knight in shining armor, shoot up the place, save them in a really dumb fight for reasons fight's dumb is different. If I go into everything about Fallout 4 that's dumb, we're gonna be here a while. Um, but yeah, your introduction to these guys is mainly through a companion named Preston Garvey, and Preston Garvey may be the most egregious example I have ever seen of an NPC going, "Oh shit, you're the main character," because you show up and he immediately makes you the leader of the faction. Because Bethesda's obsessed with letting you be the leaders of the faction, they just kind of shortcut everything here. Now, why does he do this? He does this because the Minutemen are the fallback faction. Uh, every other faction, you can kind of fuck up and piss them off, and now you won't be able to, be with them for the rest of the game. But Bethesda is terrified of letting you break things. They do all that on their own, but they're terrified of letting you break their story. So the Minutemen, no matter how much of a vicious lunatic you are, will always be there for you because you're the general of the Minutemen, and it's really kind of just you and Preston and a whole bunch of other nameless NPCs who are supposedly going around and protecting all the settlements of the Wasteland that you're bringing into this network. Though really, whenever they need your help, they need specifically your help because you are going to get pinged for every single one of these settlements that gets attacked. You're going to be the one who has to run across the Wasteland to go save them. Um, so I kind of I covered a lot of I kind of went about a bit of a roundabout way, but the Minutemen uh, are a really really bad choice for a Fallout faction, considering they're kind of the most unambiguously, hey, we want a stable, friendly wasteland here, which means they're a really bad choice for we accept everyone, including the person who might be running around shooting every NPC they meet and raiding every location they run into. The Minutemen, you cannot get the Minutemen hostile unless you do a weird DLC thing, which doesn't really quite gel with what their mission statement is supposed to be.
So what about the other factions? If the Minutemen are so dumb, surely one of the other factions must be really cool and intelligently, like, designed from a game perspective.
All right. So we're gonna move on to the railroad next, because there's one aspect of the Fallout 4 setting in particular that we haven't covered, which is synths. And synths are robots that look and act just like people. They're created by the secretive organization called the Institute, who is another faction that we'll get into later. Um, but so synths are robots that look like people, and the look and act like people. And the railroad is a group that is dedicated to saving these synths from the institute and getting them out to safety, because they are trying to be like we're the Underground Railroad, like that we had for slaves. So let's talk about them for robots because that's definitely a comparison that Bethesda's intellectually prepared to make. Um, Here's the problem. The Institute's whole deal is synths are people and they deserve equal rights, and you better be prepared to take a bullet for this thing. And if your answer to the question, are robots people, is a solid absolutely not, that's a stupid question, uh, like it is for me, I work in software, I've talked to robots, they're not people, they're not that smart, or at least they're not worthy of moral consideration. Um, the railroad and a lot of the moral questions in Fallout 4 lose all weight. Because again, they are robots. They look like people, they act like people, they're essentially machines. And I personally don't feel like that the Wasteland, as it exists, okay, the Wasteland is a place where your odds of dying on any given day are pretty high. You might starve to death, you might run out of water, you might die of radiation sickness, you might be killed by roving bands of raiders or mutants. Uh, I do not believe that the people of the Wasteland have the time or resources to devote to this bullshit when there is an active human slave trade that basically no one is doing anything about in the Fallout universe, and you expect me to believe that there's this organization with any kind of social power uh, trying to rescue robots. Um, they are they're not they're presented as kind of like this underground secretive organization, but they're basically just a bunch of larpers in a basement clubhouse, um, who they have the here's what the railroad should have been. The railroad should have been one wacky side quest, because the railroad has one wacky side quest worth of believability to how present they should be in this setting. They should not be one of the four major factions. Um, so sorry, I rambled a lot there, but the game basically asks, are robots people, and doesn't sort of present much of an argument in towards making you want to care about them. So if you don't, the railroad just kind of exists, and the game expects you to take them seriously, and I don't.
Okay, so we talked about the Minutemen, dumb. The Railroad, dumb. There are two more factions: the Brotherhood of Steel and the Institute.
Yes, the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood is in this game because the Brotherhood contractually has to be in every Fallout game, apparently. Even though initially they were a weird little West Coast isolationist group, and the thing that we all know about isolationist groups is that they expand. That's what they're known for. But the Brotherhood of Steel generally is about hoarding technology. Uh, they've got a weird nightly order thing going on with them. They're fun. They're weird. They probably should not have been uh, a major faction in this game, because they show up to the Commonwealth and they show up in dramatic fashion on a big ass zeppelin with helicopters, dudes in power armor and miniguns. I almost forgot that there is a section in this game that is a helicopter turret section, like we're in 2002 again. Um, but yeah, they're big dudes in armor, and their deal is, they hoard technology. Okay, they hoard technology. So why have they come here? Not entirely clear. I think the reason the game gives is because the Institute is all weird and mysterious and has dangerous technology, and the Brotherhood needs to go stop them and get that tech, because the Brotherhood needs to fight every battle in the world because that's what isolationist groups do. Um, so yeah, so the Brotherhood has come to the Commonwealth to to be the game because we need the Brotherhood in the game. Um, but a thing that comes up a lot as you interact with the Brotherhood is that they have an absolute hate boner for synths. Synths need to be stopped. Synths need to be destroyed. Institute bad because synths. Um, which raises the question: why does the Brotherhood care so much about synths? Brotherhood's about just get the technology, stick it in the vault, study it, protect all that business. Realistically, the synths shouldn't really be any different than like a cache of laser rifles. It's not really a reason to send a whole freaking battalion down here. Um, but once again, if your question to our sense people are no, I don't really care about sense. The Brotherhood doesn't have a whole lot of draw because you can't really get in on their whole hate crusade against what are essentially radiators with faces. Um, so Brotherhood is here because contractually the Brotherhood has to be here. Once again, not a faction I feel like probably should have been one of the four major factions of the game.
Okay,
Uh,
so that brings us to the Institute, the people who are making these synths.
all right. The Institute. So the Institutes are the boogeymen of the Commonwealth. They're a weird, mysterious organization. People don't know too much about them except that they make synths and they're scary. They've done some like weird stuff in the past. Uh, but eventually you meet up with them and you can learn about them, and you learn they've actually got a lot of stuff going on. Um, they have they are a group of scientists in an underground bunk in a big expansive underground bunker. They've got fantastic technology. They're like cloning gorillas or some kind of monkey. I forget exactly what. Uh, they're making these synth robots. They've got a very high tech, stable, functioning society that is basically totally safe from the outside world. So what do these guys do? They do a bunch of evil shit for no reason. Um, so, couple things that the Institute has done. In the past, the groups of the Commonwealth at one point tried to kind of get a functioning government together, right? To try and rebuild. And the Institute kind of showed up and slaughtered all of them. Why did they do that? The surface is essentially no threat to the Institute. Why is that? Because the only way you can get into the Institute is through teleporters. Yes, they have teleporter technology because they're freaking sci fi lunatics. Which also means again, surface, no threat to them. They also don't seem to be terribly interested in colonizing the top. They send synths up, but they're all kind of just happy to hang out in their bunker. I think in the future their plans are to go out and present themselves as, hey, we're the good guys. We're here to make things better. That's why we killed all y'all 10 years ago for no reason. Um, so yeah, so they like to kill political people trying to form governments. They like to also send their synths up. They're robots that look and act like people. Uh, they like to kill people and replace them with synth duplicates. I don't know why they do this either. I believe there's some bits where it's like, oh, they're spying. They're spying on all the political machinations or whatever to guide the Commonwealth in the direction they want. What is the direction they want? Who knows? Because no one seems to be actually doing anything besides the player character to move anything in any particular direction. And you might think, okay, so they're killing people. They're killing people and replace them. So like, mayors and leaders of settlements. And yeah, they've killed one leader of a settlement and replaced him. They also killed like just a random farmer and replaced him. Why did they do that? Who knows? Uh, so again, just lots of evil shit for no reason. They're also experimenting with this FEV virus, which is this weird DNA magic thing that shows up in a lot of the Fallout games, because again, contractually obligated to have the FEV virus and super mutants in every Fallout game. Uh, they made super mutants for no reason. Um, so the Institute, uh, being mysterious, hiding in the shadows, making a whole bunch of sense. So they're making all these sense, right? And since they are big into synths, they love making synths, sending these guys out. They've got multiple generations of since they got the basic ones, which are basically just robots. They got weird skull faces. They're the scary dudes you fight a whole lot of. They got more advanced ones in and their top tier ones are the ones that are basically can look and act like people. Okay, so they're pouring so much research into making these synths and send them out. And these synths, they're great. They're awesome. Because you have this loyal robotic workforce that can do all the crazy dangerous stuff you need in a nuclear post-apocalypse. Those are the guys that could be. You could send those out to rebuild society because there's a lot of dangerous stuff. It's great to have you have this robot group. So that's why they're putting all these resources into making sense, right? Because they have this loyal, perfect robot army, right? No, the synths are super not loyal because, again, for some reason, they've decided to give them human-like intelligence and human-like emotions. There is a huge portion of them that are defecting and running away, and that's what the railroad is dealing with. So they're putting a ton of resources into building all these synths. They're also putting a ton of resources, as in an entire division, into hunting down all of the synths that are running away. Now, why are they doing all this? Because all this is focused on their tier 3 synths, the best ones. I mentioned, the tier 1 synths, the ones that are basically the ones that are basically just skeletons. Those are pretty good robots. Those ones are actually perfectly loyal because they're scary, and you can't have scary robots doing friendly human things apparently. But those ones, they're robots. They're immune to radiation. They could rebuild society. Why is the Institute not just focusing entirely on those guys? Because then the game couldn't ask the question, are robots people? And again, the answer is no. I don't care about this moral conflict here. So the Institute doing a whole bunch of evil shit for no reason and pouring a ton of resources into synths for no reason.
Sounds about right.
Nice.
Don, do you have anything you want to add, Don?
I feel like
this, by the way, this what has happened. This was based on a slightly buzzed rant I gave when Don and I were having dinner. So I think I've covered most of the points I covered there. But again, I was slightly buzzed. I don't remember everything that happened in that
it's all good.
conversation.
It sounds
Don?
like the Institute is like a umbrella corporation, but much less nefarious, but still bad.
Yeah, so it's like, Umbrella Corporation needs to make zombie apocalypses to do their thing. The Institute doesn't need to do anything evil. They just choose to for no reason. Which also, by the way, that's why in my playthrough of Fallout 4, I sided with the Institute. For two reasons. One, because massacring those LARPers in their basement was fun. And I felt like they deserved it because they were stupid. But mostly because the Institute is the best positioned faction to actually do some good in the Wasteland if everyone in charge of it wasn't stupid. So, take it over. And the game doesn't really give you much of an option to be like, hey, let's just stop being pointlessly evil. You can say, let's cut down on synth production. You don't really have an option to just call them out on why are you making machines essentially built to betray you. But you can't have everything.
Is it a game where there's like different endings or outcomes based on who you side with?
It's kinda.
kind of.
Yeah, there's, I don't even. I don't even remember. Didn't Fallout 4 not have the whole ending slide business that the series is famous for? Don, do you remember this?
I don't. There was like a montage at the end, but I don't think it was that much different based on what faction you pick. Because I think the game has you try and neutralize every other faction that you don't side with, or at least
Yeah.
some of them.
If you side with the Minutemen, you don't have to. Now, do you have to kill the Brotherhood? I think there's the Minutemen
I don't
can exist alongside of some other factions. Oh, I didn't even bring this up though. They do though pick a fight with the Institute, which it doesn't really make a lot of sense for them to be picking fights.
Yeah,
But
I
it's kind of
like I remember the quest where you teleport into the Institute, and let's say you go in with the Minutemen, and the mechanic is like, hey, you gotta be prepared for anything that's about to happen. And so I'm thinking, oh my god, this is the end of the game. And so I get all my gear, I'm all ready, I'm hyped up, I do all the side quests, and then I teleport into the Institute. And it's like, welcome, son, or father, or whatever. And I'm like, what? Where's the battle? You just walk around the Institute for half an hour, just talking to people, and you don't fight anyone.
Okay, so we're about to spoil something in Fallout 4, but who cares? The writers didn't care much about the story, so I'm not going to either. Your son who got kidnapped, that little bit where you got frozen again and then unfrozen, that wasn't like a month or whatever. That was years. Your son's now an old man, and he's the leader of the Institute. but also who cares? Because it doesn't really matter that much. All it means is that when you show up to be like, all right, I'm here. He's like, hey, uh, you should join the institute. And then when you join the institute, and you get to be the leader. Because I definitely agree that a bunch of crazy meritocracy scientists would agree to this kind of nepotism uh, from some dude who knows nothing about the institute and just got brought in.
Also,
Um,
the biggest plot hole with the whole father son thing is that when you ask your son, why did you unfreeze me? Why didn't you just come get me instead of making me do this epic, dangerous quest throughout the wasteland where I literally walked into a radioactive nuclear crater to find a random scientist that can build me a teleportation device to find you? And the answer was, well, we just wanted to see what would happen. Like literally, that was the explanation, and I'm like, oh my god! If you were really my son, I'd be so angry at you.
Also, the mercenary who killed your spouse, who might I remind you is your son's parent, is still employed by the institute. Still just does some stuff. Uh, I think by the time you get unfrozen, like he's kind of broken off and he's off on his own space. But you'd think that maybe the leader of the Capitol's of the, not the I about to say the Capital Wasteland. That was a different game. The leader of the Commonwealth's biggest, scariest boogeyman would have maybe done something about him. And oh my god, I almost forgot about. Sorry, there's so many dumb things about it. I almost forgot about the memory dreamscape bullshit that you pull out of the mercenary's brain to go track down the institute. Uh, which I don't know if it's worth getting into that. In this, at one point you find some of the most advanced technology that like exists in this setting, and they're essentially using it as a movie theater. um can
Well,
yeah
there's not much to do in an apocalyptic wasteland, so you don't want to put the technology to waste.
no um
Okay,
God.
speaking of mercenaries, there is one thing that I thought was actually kind of cool that they did in Fallout 4. Actually, multiple things, but I'll say one of them. Because the game's not all bad, even though I'll complain about it a lot. You meet a mercenary in this like dirty town called Good Neighbor, and you go into this like underground bar that's like basically in the remains of an old subway station. And you find this guy, and you basically just you give him some money so he follows you around. And he's like your own personal mercenary, one of your followers. And as you talk to him, you realize, oh yeah, like I used to live in the capital wasteland, and then I came here. And he says, oh yeah, but my name's McReady. And you realize, wait a second, McReady. That's the guy who greets you at the gate of another village that's only populated by kids in Fallout 3. Like this happened like 10 years ago in the in-game universe. And you realize, oh my god, that guy is now in this game, which I thought was actually kind of funny. But the real thing is, why does Little Lamplight exist? Why does this little village of kids exist in Fallout 3, even though it's been like 200 years since the nuclear war? And I think the explanation for this little settlement was originally there was a group of kids who were on a field trip inside this cave when the bombs fell. But that doesn't explain the next 200 years. Where are the kids coming from? Why are there 6-year-olds in this cave? It doesn't make any sense.
The reason that almost everything in the Bethesda Fallout games exists, which is someone said, "Hey, wouldn't it be cool if?" and then the thought ended there. So that's why there's that's
Okay,
that
so,
that's why.
the reason I like Fallout 3 is because it's more like a collection of short stories about how people handle extreme stress. You have good guys, you have cannibals, you have people just trying to, find some water. And Fallout 4 just feels like a standard RPG. Oh, and Fallout New Vegas just feels like politics.
I enjoy the politics. Fallout 4 does have some fun, weird set pieces, but the thought process ends at the fun, weird set piece. A bunch of robot pirates taking off on a pirate ship and crashing into a building. That's a cool, fun, weird set piece. It's dumb. There's probably okay. I will mention fun, not as
See,
claw. The whole fight with the Death Claw is a fun, weird set piece. Which, if you have any concept of what power armor is supposed to mean or what a Death Claw is supposed to mean, is entirely ruined. But if you're just getting into this for a fun, weird action game, sure, that's a fun set piece.
So the thing is, the difference between a game like Fallout and Borderlands, in my opinion, is that the context behind the stuff that you're doing. Like in Borderlands, it's just okay, go and kill this random guy. That's your quest. Okay. But in Fallout 4, it's more like or in Fallout 3, it's more like let's steal the Declaration of Independence. And in order to do that, we have to go into this underground like secret facility that's like 200 years old, either fight all these robot guards that have been still operating since then, or sneak around them or disable them by hacking their computer. And then you find a robot that is cosplaying as one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence. And you have the choice, either kill the robot and take the Declaration of Independence, or do another side quest where you go to like the library to find this like really old bottle of ink, bring it back to him so he can make a copy, and then you bring back the Declaration of Independence or the copy to the Historical Society of the people who are living in this like beached aircraft carrier for some reason. And that's an interesting quest.
Whereas
That sounds fun.
A lot of Fallout 4's quests are radiant. So it's go to this location and pick up this item that just got generated. Go to this location and kill a bunch of ghouls. I will say, fighting feral ghouls in Fallout 4 is fun because they swarm at you like a swarm of zombies. As you shoot them, their limbs fly off.
No, that is terrifying. The one thing I really disliked about the Fallout series is having to fight feral ghouls in underground locations where it's like super dark and super scary. And I know, even though like if I have like a high level character, it doesn't matter. There's just something psychologically scary about hearing them and then having them like charge at you and like they're just shapeless, formless, uncanny valley type deformed mutant humans. And that, I fear no man, but that thing, it scares me.
Did you have any other questions for Fallout 4, Don?
I will say the soundtrack is pretty cool.
Okay.
Soundtracks of Fallout are always cool.
Okay. So some positives, not all bad.
Most of my criticism is with some of the gameplay and all of the writing. But there's fun bits. There's just a lot of dumb bits. There's an unacceptable amount of dumb bits.
Were the other Fallout games more enjoyable? It seems like Fallout 3 is considered more enjoyable.
So I have played 1, 3, New Vegas, and 4. My favorite's New Vegas, which is
Interesting.
There's a lot of bugs in that game. It is definitely a flawed masterpiece, but I do think it's a masterpiece. The writing is a lot better, and that's partially because Bethesda was not at the helm. But opinions will differ on on what people like. I like New Vegas, just because it's more intelligent. There is more thought put into like the bad guy faction that probably no one's going to actually join, but you can in Fallout New Vegas, than in Fallout 4. And in Fallout New Vegas, the fallback, oh, you fucked things up faction is an immortal robot who just body hops every time you kill him, and it also has a programming quirk where he cannot he just basically has to do what you want to do. He has to be helpful. So it's a faction that actually makes sense to not be able to fuck up.
I think there were a lot more factions in New Vegas, and I think there's more consequence to your actions in New Vegas.
Oh, definitely. New Vegas, there's how many? I'm trying to. Yeah, there's 4 main factions, and there's a whole lot of little sub factions you can interact with or try and ally. And then the final mission is this kind of cool, with the limitations of the system. It's mildly cool. This big battle where like all the factions that you interact with, are affecting it, or a lot of the factions you interact with are affecting someone. There's this faction with a bomber that they're trying to fix up, and if you help them out, they fly their bomber and bomb stuff. You can find the remnants of like the bad guys from a previous faction, and get them together for one last hurrah, and they'll fly in and shoot stuff, helping out in the final mission. So it comes together. And you can also just be a psychopath and run through, kill all the factions, and fall back on the fallback group. It's like, okay, well, guess go do this on your own, basically.
Nice. You mentioned like game design. So obviously there's a lot of things wrong with Fallout 4. What in your opinion makes for a good game design and a good experience?
Oh, so I mean that varies tremendously, but really it's again varies tremendously. And what you want out of a horror game is going to be different than what you want out of a racing game versus what you want out of an RPG. But I mean, the biggest thing is I feel like clarity of vision. Whatever it is the dev is attempting to do, making sure that many elements of the game as possible feed into that they're not contrasting in some way. So like I mentioned, Fallout 4, the supposed main story contrasts with the actual gameplay loop of Fallout 4, because the actual gameplay of Fallout 4 is run around to some random location, find some nonsense, and the story of Fallout is your son has been kidnapped, you must go save him. Um, but there's no silver bullet for what makes a good game. But I do feel uh, that clarity of vision, that cohesiveness of all the elements of the game is is ideal. And again, what precisely that will be will vary for every game.
I feel like it depends on who you're designing for. Because I've heard there are 4 like archetypes of like players that a designer could be designing for. The first is like the explorer, someone who wants to like go out and explore this universe. The second is someone who is very competitive. They want to climb the leaderboards. They want to win. They want to beat other players. The third is like the social gamer. They're not really there to play the game. They're just there to hang out with friends and have fun. And the fourth is the troll. They're there to ruin someone else's day. And one of the problems with game design is that if you try to satisfy all 4 of these groups, you're going to end up with a game that satisfies none of them.
The best, because there's a common sentiment in games and kind of the video game sphere, which games are for everyone. And the clarification is games are for everyone. Not every game is for every person. I would much prefer there to be 99 games that I hate and 1 game that I love than for there to be 100 games where I'm like, yeah, this is okay. Because everyone can then gravitate to the couple of games that they love and get really meaningful experiences out of those, rather than 100 cookie cutter whatevers.
That makes a lot of sense. I think in my experience too, playing games, I think, and you kind of see that too. And there's examples of successful games of all of those categories. Don, like I forget what it's called, but the new Legend of Zelda game definitely with how big it is, because I've seen my cousin playing it, feeds into sort of the explorer uh, type pretty heavily. And there's a lot of different games like Elder Scrolls and stuff like that for the more competitive and when people want a challenge. So I feel like I completely agree with the sentiment of like making games specifically for like who you want. I think that's also a sentiment with
You said
movies too.
You said Elden. Did you mean Elden Ring when you said Elder
Elden Ring.
Scrolls?
I didn't mean Elden Ring. I didn't mean Elden Ring.
All good.
I think
Although,
there's actually a discussion in movies as well, because I think there's been this kind of fight between different factions in movies, different types of factions of like trying to make movies that are very popular and box office heavy versus like movies that may be more niche for specific like people. And it's interesting to see how that will play out.
part of the problem now is just, I mean, this applies to video games and to movies, is that budgets are so ridiculous nowadays that it's like, okay, we need everyone who physically can see this thing to see this thing, or we are not making money off this, which leads to a lot of homogenous nonsense. And then you also don't get to make money if people get tired of the homogenous nonsense. Um, but it's difficult to be a big studio and make a small thing.
For sure. I was talking about this with my cousin because I watched Oppenheimer yesterday, which is really good. But I was thinking of like all the Marvel movies, and like they were good and I had experiences, and I feel like they're definitely made for general audiences, given just like how popular they were. But I'm not like inspired to like go back and watch any of them. But I went back, I've gone multiple times and watched like Nolan's like Batman movies, right? And I think that's like kind of like it's more of a niche thing. Like I don't think those movies, even though Nolan's very popular, I think taken in isolation, those movies aren't necessarily as generic or for everyone as the way like the Marvel movies were. And yet I feel like those movies better stand the test of time than a lot of these like the Marvel superhero movies.
Right? Part of the problem is, that again, this ties into things are so expensive right now. It's tough to make not safe bets. Everything is part of a franchise or a sequel or whatever, and it's not. It's dunking on that is well and good. Everyone does it, but it makes sense why they do it, because again, it costs so much to make these things. If you take a risk and the risk doesn't pay off, you're kind of screwed. You need safety. But everything being tied in with everything else means getting small, cohesive, meaningful experiences are kind of hard to get. It's like, oh, am I gonna care about this movie if I didn't watch the 4 other movies and the TV show? And am I gonna care about this movie when the ending needs to be open enough that they can make 3 more movies and a TV show?
Makes sense. And I think the budget plays a big part. I think sometimes you get actually the most creative filmmaking when you have a limitation with a budget, when the studio is not
Mm.
throwing everything and you're dealing with more indie films, you're forced to be more innovative. So I've seen a sci-fi movie called Coherence, which was done with a very small budget, amazing movie. One of the most complicated movies I've ever seen. Engineers tend to like this movie a lot. It's called Primer, which was directed by a mathematician, which is about time travel. And like that was literally made on a $7,000 budget. And
I,
even
I
like,
I
oh
had
yeah,
that
go for
movie recommended to me after I went on a different unrelated rant about time travel in fiction, and someone was like,
it.
"You should
Ooh,
watch Primer."
I love time travel in fiction. So we'll circle back to that. The only other thing I was going to mention is I read this great book called Rebel Without a Cause, which is how Robert Rodriguez did his first movie, or one of his first movies, El Mariachi, also like a $7,000 budget. And then that became like this super big franchise. But it was interesting because I feel like the you get more creative filmmaking by placing more limits. And so you have to think more outside the box, because you can't just use money as this like, you don't have this like what's the term called, a blank check to just do whatever you want. But yeah, going back to time travel, I hate and love time travel because I think it's sometimes overused, but when it's done right, for me it's amazing. Like I think, to me, my favorite television show of all time is Dark, which does time travel extremely well. But there's so many bad examples also in film and television.
Sell me on Dark, because I don't know anything about it. I generally hate time travel because I it is very hard to do well,
Mhm.
because you almost always do one of 3 things with time travel. You either uh, essentially remove all limits of the story. Nothing matters anymore because anything can be done or undone with time travel. Doctor Who problem. That there's no stakes to anything. There's no meaning to anything. Um, the second is that the characters are stupid, because time travel, because it opens so many things. Either they do all the things, and then first problem, or they don't do obvious things. And then it's like, okay, you have access to this fantastic technology, and I'm supposed to believe you're intelligent, but what about the obvious thing you're not doing? This is the Hermione Granger problem with her freaking time machine that just never comes up again. And then the third problem is just kind of a generic problem, which is that, okay, we need to go and fix the future. We change a thing and now the future is fixed. Okay, you just wiped out billions and billions of lives. Everyone who uses time travel is responsible for genocide on a cosmological scale, which means there is no ethical time travel in many systems, and so any system kind of has to, I feel like, explain how that thing works, kind of stuff works, or provide some kind of justification for that. Because to me, just personally, it's like, you know, you do not fuck with time travel, because
Yeah,
there is nothing outweighs the damage you could possibly do. Fortunately, time travel is impossible and it's silly. It's just a fun, silly fiction thing. But
yeah,
if you're gonna bring it into the story, please try to justify it. But now
yeah.
what's
I
the deal with
think
Dark?
I think Dark. I don't want to say too much because I feel like going in with the less amount of information creates the best experience. But I will say about Dark is like, for one, Dark's very slow and very thriller, so it isn't just like this sort of like mechanic of let's just use this thing and spam it. It just takes a while to even get into it, and part of it is, a lot of it is like it happens accidentally, and then there's a big scientific kind of background to why it happens, which, obviously time travel doesn't exist, but in the context of like a time travel like mechanic, at least isn't just like, oh, here's this car that goes 88 miles an hour or whatever it is and Back to the Future. So I feel like there's that, and then there's like multiple different threads, and like people are trying to do really smart things with the information they have. It's just that the information is incomplete. So while people don't do always the right thing, it isn't because of incompetence. It's because people are still trying to figure out mechanics, because this was all accidental anyway. And the characters tie together really well, and there's a lot of mystery that's involved that then gets explained through the time travel as opposed to the other way around. But I would watch a few episodes. It's on Netflix. It's a German show. If you like it, then that's totally cool. And if you don't, that's also cool. And also like people's motives, like and personalities and like egos come into play, but not in a way that's like they do really dumb things, in a way that most people do rational things. Some people do irrational things. But the fact that some people are doing irrational things isn't that weird. It's not like everyone's being incompetent. But it's more human too, because again, it's accidental, so it's not like intentional. But I think you should watch a few episodes and then let me know. But it's a very slow roll, and then it kind of escalates as it keeps going.
All right. So we had our time travel tangent. What's
Yeah. Don, what are your other questions on the list?
more general?
No,
game
we
stuff,
talked
or what's
about we talked about everything in Fallout that I wanted to cover.
Because I'm prepared to rant about other random game design stuff. I haven't had enough random rants yet.
Sure, we have some time. What are the goods and the bads, and maybe the uglies as well of game design?
Well, there's one. Again, I'm no expert, but there's bits of game design that I love talking about, and one of those is feedback loops. You familiar with the concept of feedback loops, just in general, or as they apply to game design? And no matter what you answer, I'm still going to explain it for the benefit of
Yeah, I mean,
whatever handful of people end up
I
listening
get
to
what a
this.
feedback loop is, and I'm sure if you explained in the context of a game, I would get it. I don't know if what you're specifically referring to though.
All right, cool. So, right, yeah, feedback loops for benefit of whoever might be listening. Is a feedback loop is a system in which the outputs of the system are fed back into the system as inputs, meaning that whatever results occur will go back into the system and affect future results. And there are two kinds of feedback loops: positive feedback loops and negative feedback loops. In a positive feedback loop, the outputs of a system, when fed back into the system, uh, will tend to produce more exaggerated versions of those outputs. Let's say you have, a simple math feedback loop, a box that multiplies the number by 2. If you have 0, you will just stay at 0 forever. That 0 is the equilibrium point. But if you put in 1, you'll get 2, and then you'll get 4, and then you'll get 8, and then you'll get 16. Whereas if you start with a negative number, negative 2, 4, 8, 16. So results with a positive feedback loop become more extreme. You deviate further from the equilibrium point. With a negative feedback loop, the outputs of a system, when fed back into the system, will tend to produce outputs that counteract those previous outputs and push you towards your equilibrium point. So, again, easy math example, something that halves whatever input you put in. So, you'll trend closer towards 0. How does this apply to game design? So, many games have some form of feedback loop where your actions will feed back to the system, affect your future actions. Very easy example. You're playing an RPG or whatever. You go out, you kill some monsters, you get some loot. You then go buy better equipment, equip yourself. You go out, you are now better at killing monsters, better at gathering loot. You then take that loot back, equip yourself, get better and better. There are feedback loops in some games are not much of a problem, and in some games are a massive problem. Some game and the kind of feedback loops that are a problem are, as most games have very noticeable positive feedback loops, as I just mentioned. Now, in a lot of games, this doesn't cause too much of a problem because uh, areas will be gated by how good you are. You will go to an area, you'll grind or do whatever until you are good enough to progress past that area. Now you'll get to a new area where the challenges are tougher, and you'll continue doing whatever you need to do to continue past this area. The game is expecting you to get better, and you get better at whatever pace is necessary for you to move on to the next area. But this creates a big problem in games where the game continues to move forward regardless of what you do. So the classic example of this is XCOM. I love XCOM. I love XCOM 2, but it has a serious problem with a positive feedback loop. Um, in XCOM, if you have one early mission, let's say you go out on an early mission and things go a little bit poorly. Some of your guys get injured. One of your rookies gets killed. Whatever. You go into the next mission. Your injured guys are still resting. You got to bring in some new rookies. You are now not as well equipped to deal with an enemy that now the difficulty has increased slightly. So you now are slightly weaker. The enemy is slightly tougher. You are probably going to do even worse on this mission. You're probably going to suffer some casualties, get more injuries. Come back into the next mission. You are now further down, the difficulties increase further. This is going to keep compounding and quite easily result in a loss. Anyone who's played a few XCOM campaigns knows that the tone of your campaign is very much set, can very much be set by the first couple of missions. And so, you might say, so if things start going poorly for you in XCOM, your whole campaign is probably just going to go poorly. And so you might just say, okay, well then, just get good, do better. And yes, but positive feedback loops are also a problem if you are doing well. And this is a very tricky problem for these kind of games to solve. Roll back the clock. Let's say you went on that early mission. You did really well. Didn't get injured, got the enemies killed. All good. You guys come back. They get experience. You gather your loot. You guys have leveled up. You go on the next mission. You are now stronger than you were before, and the game's difficulty has increased, but probably not enough to counteract how much better you are now. So you do even better. No casualties, more levels up, more supplies. Improve your dudes. Get research new tech. Upgrade your dudes. Bringing in all these specialized classes. Now you got a psi trooper, and he's mind controlling enemies or whatever. Eventually, oftentimes in an XCOM campaign, you'll get to the point where you're just styling on the enemies. They're not threats anymore. You have enough health or armor or whatever that before we had to be tactically maneuvering. You don't have to worry as much because you could take a hit or two. It's fine. Take out the big guy. You can take the hits from these little advent troopers. Who cares about them? Which, hey, awesome, great. You're doing great. But the game is now much less difficult. You are having to make much less interesting decisions. And games are at their best when you are making lots of interesting decisions. Where success or failure is balanced on a razor's edge, that is where games, I feel, tend to be the most interesting. And a positive feedback loop, even when when you're doing poorly, it means your whole campaign. And when you're going well, it means that the campaign is going to lose challenge, and you are not going to be able to make as many interesting decisions. And so, how to deal with feedback loops is an interesting problem. If your game has a positive feedback loop, one way of dealing with it is making the game short. A lot of roguelites have very, very strong feedback loops where if you get a good combo or whatever going early on, it's gonna spiral and you're gonna be doing crazy nonsense. And if things go poorly, you're like, okay, well I just didn't get the tools I need and now my run's dead. But if the run's short enough, it doesn't really matter if things go poorly or whatever. A game that I love is Into the Breach. That's a tactics roguelite. You got mechs. You're doing missions. You're upgrading them. You're getting supplies. You're fighting giant bugs. But the game is fairly short, and you can even choose when you want to go do the final battle. So if things start to go poorly for you, be like, okay, let's short circuit this. Let's go fight the final battle. See if I can win at this stage. And if things are going well, you're compounding, you're getting stronger. The game is short enough that you eventually get to the point where the game says, okay, now you have to fight the final battle. So you never can get so at the point where the game gets so ridiculously easy, the game's over. So that's one way to deal with the positive feedback loop problem. But the best way to deal with feedback loops is to instead make your game run on a negative feedback loop, which is an extremely difficult thing to do because on its surface, negative feedback loops sound like a terrible idea. Because what does it mean for a game to implement a negative feedback loop? It means the game must reward you for doing poorly and must punish you for doing well. And as a player, that sounds terrible. It's very, very difficult to do. Because you don't want to get, if you are doing well, you don't want the game to punish you. And because players, famous quote, given the opportunity, players will optimize the fun out of a game. If they can figure out how the system works, they will try and take strategic losses to buff themselves when they need it. I think it's famously in like Resident Evil speedruns, you purposefully get shot a bunch at the start so that the game's dynamic difficulty eases things up on you later. But now I get a chance to bring this up. There's a fantastic indie game studio, Supergiant Games. If you've heard of them, you probably heard them from their recent amazing success, Hades, or maybe you know them from their original breakout success, Bastion, or maybe you know them from their weird cyberpunk thing, Transistor. But I love them for their unloved middle child, Pyre. And Pyre is an awesome game. It is a combination of visual novel and 3-on-3 basketball, and I will not elaborate. I will keep spoilers. I will not spoil things, but the gist of the game is that you build up this little party of dudes for your basketball team. You send them out in these 3-on-3 matches, and your dudes, as you send them out on these matches, they get stronger, they get more abilities, they get cool, synergies with each other. You figure out how to make the best team out of the units you have. And then as you get to certain points of the game, you get the opportunity to play a high stakes game of Magic basketball. And if you win, you take one of your best players and you permanently remove them from your team. So this awesome player that probably got you this hard victory that you just fought for is now gone. And that sounds horrible because, hey, my best player's gone. That's like if your best dude in XCOM got shot. I need to figure out a whole new strategy. Is my run over? What does this mean now? But the game, again, I won't spoil things, uh, but the way the story frames it is so awesome because it is your goal. It is the thing you want to do. You want to get these guys off your team. You are purposely, building these strategies to get these guys out of your team, so that when it happens, it is this climax, this awesome feeling, and it's after they're gone that you're like, okay, how do we move on without them? And then that's when you do your refactoring and figure out your new team composition. And then if you get this big climactic thing, and you lose the fight, uh, you don't release the person from your team because at this stage the game is set. The game says, "Hey, clearly, you need some work. You don't have this all together yet. We are not going to take your best member from you." And even though purely logistically, your team is now stronger than it would be if you had won, it feels bad. It feels even though you're stronger, it feels like, oh, dang it! I really hope that next time I can weaken my team by getting rid of my best guy. But it's the best implementation of a negative feedback loop I have ever seen in the game. It is very, very difficult to make a player want to make themselves weaker, and the game does a fantastic job of it. Uh, that's my little spiel for why Pyre is better than Hades. Hades is still a great game, but Pyre's that unique little weird gem that I love.
Nice. Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like, definitely, there's a lot of positive feedback loops for things where like you need certain levels to fight certain monsters, and so there's like grinding and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. Like the idea of a negative feedback loop is fairly rare in my experience playing games.
It is because it is most games I feel like don't even attempt it because if you fuck it up, the players will hate you. Because again, it'll feel like you are punishing them for doing what you are telling them they should be trying to do. They should be trying to be good at your game, and if you punish them for that, it feels bad.
Yeah, no, that's very fair. Don, any thoughts on game designs? Things you like, don't like?
No, I think we covered everything. I don't have any epic opinions on game design.
Fair enough. Yeah, I don't have that many other questions. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about, Corey?
I mean, I could rant forever, but I don't know how much time you want. We could talk about video game moral choices or whatever, or we could cut it. Like I said, this was a stream of consciousness, whatever happened. So good luck coming up with whatever the title of this episode is going to be.
Oh, I already know what the title should be. It should be "Every Fallout 4 faction is dumb," and "dumb" is in all caps.
I mean, I have no problem writing that as given the podcast is solely view. I don't know, maybe they'll push up the views because it'll like track with like the Fallout 4 and people are like, what is this rant? Yeah,
That's
I'm
definitely
excited.
what I want my introduction to the internet to be. The guy who did no research and just yelled incoherently about the Fallout factions.
I mean, that's kind of what half the internet already is. Maybe not about Fallout factions specifically, but about incoherent ranting. But that was actually pretty coherent. I don't think you gave yourself enough credit.
Yeah.
I've seen far worse. There's an old game I used to play called Mercenaries that also had factions, but I felt like it had more consequences. Like in the first game, like you could buy things from the Russian mafia, which was a faction, but if you pissed them off, you couldn't buy things. And then there's certain weapons you could buy from certain factions and not others. It wasn't like the best design, but like it was like a more functioning design. And granted, it was like a very real world political game, so the factions made sense. There's like the Allied Nations, which is like the United Nations. There's like China, the Russian mafia. So that was pretty cool. That was a fun game.
So we're we probably don't have time for the full conversation about video game moral choices and choice or whatever. But I feel like the best most games are not very good at consequential choices.
Hmm.
A lot of them, what they will do is they will let you choose your flavor, but they all are the same basic path
Yeah.
generally. Or are you going to solve this problem are you going to solve this problem the nice way, or are you going to solve it by being a dick? But either way, the problem gets solved. And I feel like the best choices uh, are ones that really ask the player to sacrifice something. So uh, I'm not I the so a game that I know is quite good at this. I'm not a fan of the game just because the particular gameplay of it doesn't really appeal to me, but I can very much respect the game. Is this game called Least of the Painful, and that game is great at forcing hard choices on you. So the game might be like, okay, you've been captured. You got a choice: get your arm cut off, or all your party members get killed. If you get your arm cut off, like that is a permanent disability you will have for the rest of the game that is going to hurt your combat ability. If you get all your party members killed, you're gonna have to find some more party members that work with you. Um, and so that's it's not a like that is a real choice that asks you to make a potentially painful decision. There's a lot of games that it's like you can make a potentially painful decision, or like throw out some gold or whatever, and you have 10,000 gold. Who cares? Or uh, or yeah, you can be a dick or you can be a nice guy, but we're not going to actually punish you in any way for being a nice guy, because most games present the good moral lesson that you should be a good nice person, which is good, but it doesn't kind of get into, hey, it's actually kind of difficult to be a good person in the real world, which is what actually makes being a good person uh you know partially meaningful. you know no one wakes up in the morning and says, "Today I will be evil," uh, but people wake up in the morning and say, "Today I will take what is mine. Today I'm not gonna, suffer this stuff anymore." No one is the villain of their own story. So when video games say, "Hey, do you want to be good or you want to be evil?" Uh, they kind of are messing up the choice right out of the gate.
Well said. Well said.
I think that's a good place to end it. We'll let the listeners decide if they want to be good or evil tomorrow.
For sure. I mean,
Remember
I
that
don't know. Umbrella
there's
Corporation is doing some pretty interesting things. I don't know. I just love the Resident Evil series, but yeah. This was amazing. Thanks for coming on, Cory and Don. Excited to get another podcast out because it's been a while, and hoping that people enjoy this. I think anyone that loves Fallout will definitely enjoy this. They'll probably
thanks for
commiserate in the pain.
yeah, thanks for letting me rant about nonsense.
All good, all good. But yeah, thanks again, guys.